Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is the USA Today Bestselling author of a debut novel, Nowhere Near Goodbye, published in 2020 by Red Adept Publishing. Previously, she worked in the healthcare industry before opting for an early retirement, which lasted all of 3 months. She then accepted a finance position for which she had absolutely no background, and 4 years later, she decided to write a book, but not about finance. Travel is her passion, along with reading, writing, hiking, and exploring antique shops. Her greatest love is Miss Molly, her rescue beagle. There are stories to be told about beagles, and my guest hopes to incorporate some of them into her books. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Barbara Conrey.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Barbara, our opening question is always, so what took you so long to write your first book?
I like to think I'm a late bloomer, but actually I needed the time to be right. And I needed the story, and the story found me, and I still didn't have the time to write it. But finally, once I retired for good, then I wrote my book.
Well, once you knew you had to write that book, how did you proceed?
I proceeded in every single wrong way one could do it. I thought writing a book meant telling a story. So I simply sat down and wrote out my story, and it was very dull and bland, and it was everything that a story should not be. But fortunately for me, I belong to a writers association that provided so much guidance, so many friends, so many classes that I could attend. And I literally rewrote that book and rewrote it, and finally came up with a book that was what I thought ready to be submitted to a publisher. And I was very fortunate that my book was accepted. It was the only publisher I submitted it to, which was Red Adept Publishing. They accepted it. They assigned an editor to me, and I rewrote the book once again.
Well, Barbara, not every writer can add USA Today Bestselling author behind their name, but we all aspire to. Can you share with us how such a feat occurs?
I tell you what, I never had that in my thoughts. That was not my dream. My dream was simply to hold my book in my hands, to see my name on a book. And my book just kind of took off, and it did really well. And my publisher contacted me, and she said, I think you're going to make the list. And I said, what list would that be? And she said, you're really going close to USA Today. And I hit it. And it was exciting, thrilling, exhausting, a lot of fun. And yes, I'm very proud of it, and I'm very proud of my book. And but it was never it was not a goal. It was not even something that I thought I could achieve. So I've been very fortunate. I think I've been lucky, and hitting a list like that does take a certain amount of luck, because if you look at the criteria for how USA Today books are selected, it's strictly by the numbers, and it's the first 150 top selling books for a specific time period. And depending on who else is releasing a book or re-releasing a book, you could be number 151, and you could be one book short of that number, and you don't get it, and they stop. It just goes so far. So that's the luck part. And it's also a lot of hard work, but that's how it happened. And I am just both nervous about it and happy about it, because I do have another book coming out, and I know the expectation is going to be right there for me, like what's going to happen with this book. So it's kind of like the kid who comes home with an A. Well, you're kind of always expected to get A's. So we'll see.
That's very true. I feel the same way about my second book. I think people could say it's not as good as our first, or it's much better than the first. And, so you just don't know what to expect with the second one.
I know. That's exactly true. And actually, my second book is just totally the story of my heart. So I have high expectations for it. I hope that I'm not disappointed, but it meant a lot to me that I was able to write it.
Yeah, it will be wonderful. What about the marketing of that book? Did you think that had something to do with your sales? Were there any things that you think really helped to
Absolutely
push the needle forward?
Yes, absolutely. Marketing is imperative. And whether you're with a big press or small press, everybody is expected to do a certain amount of marketing, no matter how big of an author you are. It's not like the old days. It's kind of like the movies, how the movies used to be, where you'd be under the movie's name, and they would protect you and take care of you. Well, now it's every man for himself. And that's kind of how it is with authors. You have to do a lot of your own marketing. You have to participate. And I found it difficult to promote myself. So what I've always done is promoted other authors. And that has helped me so much, because number one, they then promote me. And number two, my name is always out there, even if I'm not talking about me or my book. And it's a win-win situation. And I love doing it. And that makes it easy, because putting yourself out on social media is not, for me, the easiest thing to do, especially doing live events. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm doing a little bit of it now, but I still find it stressful, and this isn't supposed to be stressful, but doing something live for me can be stressful.
It really can be. And you have to really pick and choose, because I've been places where I had one or two people show up, and you've spent money on hotel rooms and hauled your books, and done so much to make the event a success, and you think, well, I don't know if that was worthwhile or not. You have to really choose where you're going to go and what you're going to do for your time.
That's true. And then unfortunately, releasing a book during COVID and the first year of COVID, when no one was vaccinated and there was so much unknown, left no opportunity for live events. But Zoom became very popular, and I was fine with that. And I'm not even sure this time whether I'm going to do a live event, because there are still so many questions. And I mean, really, a live event only captures a certain audience, as opposed to, if you do, when I did my book release for Nowhere Near Goodbye, I had people from all over the country, and it was fabulous. You know, it was like everybody was celebrating with me, all my friends and new readers, and it was great. But when you do a live event, like I've done bookstores and I've enjoyed doing them, but it is more of a specific group, and it's obviously much smaller, and it's also kind of chancy, because like you said, you could show up and there could be one or two people, and you do have to wonder, because it's time consuming, it's stressful, it's expensive, you know. But I'm try to react and interact with people on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I have not touched TikTok at all. I don't think it's for my age group.
I don't think that is our age group.
I like to watch the things with the puppies and the kitties, you know, all of that. Like I go on it and watch things, but that's as far as I've gone with it. And I thoroughly enjoy that. But I think that's quite out of my skill set.
Well, they say that book talk has become so popular and can make a book hit the list, but I'm just not sure if you have to dance holding your book or what you have to do to get on TikTok.
And I think it also depends on the genre. I think some genres have done very well, especially thrillers and mysteries. I'm not sure book club fiction or literary fiction is quite in that same category. I don't think you're going to capture the kind of readers who like those kinds of books. So I don't know. I don't know enough about it. And to tell you the truth, I haven't really looked into it. I just watch the dogs and the cats.
I think racy romance does pretty well on there.
Oh yeah, I can see where that would be. Yeah, and that's definitely out of my skill set.
Mine too. Somebody asked me about my romantic scenes, and I said they're all fade to black.
Yes, exactly. I have a real problem with that, and I touch on that a little bit in my second book, and it was not comfortable.
It's awkward. It's very awkward.
It is. And I've read, and I think it's true, less is more. Instead of being like really graphic, I think it's good to let the reader let their imagination go, you know, and let it take them where they want to take it, as opposed to you know, spelling it all out for them. And that's kind of, I mean, my second book is not at all what one would consider like a love story to that degree, but there were a couple of scenes, and I treated them very carefully and to the best of what I was able to do.
Well, that's the way I feel. And I think some books that I listen to just throw some scenes in there for shock value. I just think, you know, I don't know that we needed that. I was kind of thrown out of the book instead of brought into the book by some of the things that I've read.
I think listening as opposed to reading could be even more jarring for that type of material. I'm not sure, but yeah, that could be interesting.
Well, I know that a lot of people have Zoom, they call it Zoom fatigue, But like you said, for me, being able to zoom around the country and to meet with book clubs in their own living rooms, has just really been special. And I've enjoyed doing that. And I never even knew what Zoom was before COVID. Yeah.
I didn't either. And I'll tell you what, I bet Zoom stock just went sky high. I mean, if there's one company that really did well during the whole COVID, and they still are. And yes, I know what Zoom fatigue is, and I feel it occasionally myself, but it's become a fact of life, and I think it will remain a fact of life. I think people have discovered how much more they can reach, how many more people they can reach by doing this, and it's profitable for Zoom. It's also very necessary for authors and all sorts of other businesses. But I think specifically for authors, I've done many book clubs where it's held in someone's house and I'm on Zoom. Now I do live book clubs in my area, which I love to do. But I've also done them all over the country. So without Zoom, I would not be able to do that, So it's definitely served its purpose.
And I think it's going to be one of those words that turns into a verb, that we
Yes.
use it as a verb now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're absolutely right.
How did you determine the plot of your first book and your second? Okay,
well, my first book, although it's totally fiction, it is based on a true experience. A good friend of mine lost a family loved one through a brain tumor, glioblastoma. And it was a child, and my friend was just totally destroyed. And this made me, watching her, just made me so angry. And at the time, I was not a writer. I was still working full time. And I saw this woman literally be destroyed, and the child died. And it was devastating. It was devastating for everyone who knew about it. And I carried this around in my head for years, saying, if I'm ever going to write a book, this is the first book I'm going to write. And that's what I did. The book started to be about the child, but as I'm writing and as I'm meditating every morning, I'm thinking to myself, the book really isn't about the child. The book is about the doctor who found a cure. Of course, this is where the fiction comes in, because there is no cure. So that was my story. It was all about what this female doctor gave up in order to create a cure for this incurable disease. I really worried about touching on this subject because it's a very delicate subject. I know personally, besides my friend and her child, I know 3 other people who have had loved ones die of this tumor. In fact, when my book was at the stage of handing it off to critique partners, one of my critique partners, I sent her the manuscript and she got right back to me and she said, I can't read this. Mm-hmm. And I said, why? And she said, because my mother's just been diagnosed with glioblastoma. She has not read the book yet, and her mother died the day before my book was released. And she still hasn't recovered. Mm-hmm. I am overwhelmed by the number of people who have contacted me because they felt I touched on a really important subject. I did a lot of research. The research is there. It's truth, and it's honest, and it's ugly. I fabricated the whole procedure on how it could be cured, but I really dealt with a mother who gave up her family and her own child in order to devote herself to the research. That's what the book ended up being about. But I have not given a talk or been to a book club that someone has not raised their hand and said, my so-and-so died from this brain tumor. And this is where I get angry, because it's still considered a rare disease. And in cancer situations, it is rare. But as opposed to breast cancer and all the other types of cancers one could have. But it's a killer. And I wrote the book out of anger. I wrote the book because I was tired of people dying. It helped me because I got to meet so many people who have suffered that same death, and yet my book brought them some kind of peace. So it means a lot to me.
I think that's my favorite part about being a writer, is that our words touch so many people, and there are so many stories that others can share with us, just like you said, of their own experiences. And it's just a beautiful thing when those two come together.
It is. It's it was totally unexpected. What else was totally unexpected was the doctors and nurses who reached out to me and said, yes, this is what it's like. This is what it's like to devote yourself to that degree. And also women, female doctors and nurses said, yes, when we do this, we are frowned upon. I mean, there was no reader who loved my protagonist, trust me. But if I had made my protagonist male, I would have had a completely different reaction. So that has also brought up conversations. And again, it was a surprising thing to me that women felt so strongly about how I presented the protagonist, and also how I hit on so many truths by doing that, the way I did it. Which actually, that whole story, there was a very minor character in my book who was a friend to the protagonist. And before I was done writing Nowhere Near Goodbye, I knew I wanted to write her story. So that's what my second book is, actually a prequel to Nowhere Near Goodbye, but it's this secondary character. It's her story. And of course, she's got her own secrets and her own catastrophes, tragedies, and they all come out in her book. And I had to write her story. So that's how the second book came about.
I love when that happens. I love when the characters are so strong and speaking to us that we have to get their stories down as well.
Yes, I love the whole magic. I mean, to me, the magic is when I can't write by hand anymore. I type, and the magic is with my fingers. It's just so magical.
Well, why don't you read for us from your book and let us hear your tone and voice?
What I'm going to read, as I mentioned, the little girl who died, she ended up in the book only being in the prologue and in the epilogue. She ended up being dead the entire time, except for some backstory. So she's talking right now in the prologue from heaven. And this is Kate. My headaches went from not a big deal to the size of Montana. Then my eyesight took a hit. Then my stomach and my equilibrium. And equilibrium, for those who needed it explained, was a word meaning balance. I wasn't able to stand on my own 2 feet without tripping over them. Let me just add that Kate is 11 years old at this point when she dies. Mrs. Clark's advanced level reading class was where I first noticed I couldn't see the assignments written on the blackboard. no matter how many times I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that when I opened them again, I would be able to read the words and numbers written there. All I saw was a blur that didn't mean crap to me. I tried to remember the last time I easily read the board, but I couldn't. And so I did what kids did when they were scared but too stupid to admit it. I hid my symptoms as long as I could. Eventually, fear won out though, and I told my mom. I thought I needed glasses. Actually, that wasn't true. I didn't tell her. I made Emma tell her, because that was the kind of friend Emma was. She would do anything I asked her to, no matter what. My mom made an appointment with the ophthalmologist. No simple optometrist for me, to see if I was right, to see if Emma was right and that I needed glasses. That visit didn't go so well. It didn't go so well in that the ophthalmologist, Dr. Wells, examined my eyes for what seemed, even to me, to be a long time. And the longer he looked, the nicer he got. And he was not a nice man. So that must have been an effort for him. Why don't you scoot on out to the waiting room and have Miss Carroll send your parents on back, he finally said, patting me on the head like I was some little kid. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. Miss Carroll, whom I will forever remember for her fondness for skin-tight faux leather pants, also patted me on the head before calling Mom and Dad into the office, which left me alone in the waiting room. Sometimes I didn't do so well alone. I would find myself doing mindless stuff that could be interpreted as destructive. Sometimes I wasn't even aware of what I was doing until the damage stared me in the face. On that particular day, what caught my attention was a loose black thread from one of the little dots sewn onto my chair seat in the waiting room. Pulling those threads out was like peeling dead skin from my sunburned body. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. I'd been taught to respect other people's property, but I picked those thoughts gone, every last one. I just managed to kick the evidence of my destructive ways into the corner when my parents came to get me. Turned out I didn't need glasses. So, and I want to add that her friend Emma, who is referenced in the story here, is actually the little girl who grew up to be the doctor who found the cure for, because she, throughout the story, she promises Kate that she will find a cure for glioblastoma, even though she also is 11 years old.
That's very powerful, Barbara. And you just captured the voice of an 11-year-old, all of her thoughts and what you would have been thinking as a child about all of this.
She was my favorite character, and she didn't get cut until my publisher's editor said she has to go. And so I literally had to cut half the book, and we agreed that she could be in the prologue and the epilogue. And actually, I totally believe that editor did me a world of good. I think she was absolutely right. It killed me to do it. And I, at some point, thought maybe I would write Kate's story just from her total point of view. But then we're switching genres, and I decided not to go that way. I think Kate is done talking to me. And I think you can understand that since you're a writer also.
I believe it probably made it stronger just to get her voice at the beginning and the end. Probably made it even more poignant.
I think so. I really do. But it wasn't the way I saw the book, which is why I credit editors so much.
They can help us strengthen and cut and get
They
rid of the
can.
waste and and
Yes.
put it in a file you might want to use later.
That I do. Yes. I don't totally get rid of anything.
Well, what about your writing routine? Do you write every day now that you've written a second book and started on a third?
I do write every day. I write every morning, 7 days a week. Um, Usually in the afternoon, I have some writer related things to do. I have some marketing things to do. I have a little housework to do, run a little errands. And my brain just doesn't seem to function quite as well in the afternoon as it does in the morning. I'm a morning person. I'm thinking about my characters all the time. But in fact, I was running errands the other day and I thought, oh, I've got the ending for book 3. I know what I'm going to do because it's been bothering me how I'm going to end this book. And I usually like to know right when I start the book how it's going to end. And I wasn't sure with this third book. So now I feel confident that I've got a road to follow. So I'm pretty happy about that.
I do like to have the beginning and the end, and then I can worry about that mushy middle as I go through.
I know, right? And it does get mushy. It's like it's takes a lot to keep that momentum going, to keep and think about it. How many books have you read that you felt, oh yeah, this is a little boring here? And then it picks up. And most of the time, if the book is good, readers are willing to get through that. But writers try very hard not to do that. I mean, it's I think we all are aware of it. And I think we all try really hard to keep that tension moving, to keep the momentum going, to keep those pages turning. It's a lot of work.
Do you read other writers, or do you try to stay away from other writers while you're writing?
No, I read constantly. And I don't find it, it doesn't alter my way of writing or my way of thinking, but sometimes it makes me think about something that's going on in my book a little differently. It just makes me think, and that's a good thing. It may or may not be something I even change, but it makes me think about it. So I think I can't not read. I am just like, my to be read pile is so out of control. It's like I just have books stacked everywhere, and then I have a Kindle that's just filled with books, and I probably will never read them all, but I hope to, but I do read. Some authors won't, they won't read in their genre. And other authors, I think, feel like I do, like it's helpful. Sometimes it's not helpful in that you're reading a really good book and you think, oh, I'll never be able to write like this, and that can be a little disconcerting. And sometimes you think, oh, I could do better than that,
Exactly.
and that feels good, obviously. But yes, I read all the time.
Well, I agree on everything you said. Our writers over 50 are quite unique. Do you have any advice for writers 50 and above? Maybe something you wish you'd heard when you started writing?
That's funny because everything that I've heard and that I've learned is common sense. I may not have thought about it, not to the point where it really grabs you. But the most important thing I've learned is, if you really want something, if you really want to see your book published, do not give up. There will be a path for your story. It may not be the story you started out with, and I am an example of that. But it will be the story that you were meant to write, and it will find an audience. And I truly, truly believe this. I have given talks on this to younger authors because they might be a little more impatient. I don't think age is necessarily something that grants you patience automatically, but we do have something to offer, because we've lived longer, we've suffered more, we've been happier more frequently. We have on our side what's behind us, and that's important. And so I give two different talks. I give the one about not giving up, and I give the one about you've got what you need. You can do, if this is what you really want to do, you can do it. And I believe that with all my heart. I really do. I will never, ever forget when I received a call from my publisher saying that they wanted to publish my book. I literally had my head on the table with the tears streaming down my face, holding onto my phone, talking to her. Like I could barely breathe. I was so excited. And I'll be honest. In fact, I just mentioned this to them just recently. I put all my eggs in one basket. I do not suggest to anyone to do that. I did research. I knew which publisher I wanted. I know how I wanted to proceed. And in my heart, I kept telling myself, if they don't take my book, I'm done. And in my heart, I also knew I would never give up. And actually that not give up thing comes into play in Nowhere Near Goodbye. It's like, it's something that one doctor tells another, the doctor who performs the research and creates the surgery. Her benefactor keeps telling her, don't give up, we don't give up, and it's like, it's something that came out in the book, totally unplanned, but it's how I think. It's like, if you are meant to do something, then just do it.
I don't think we could ask for better advice than that. So thank you so much, Barbara, for being with us today. I'm very excited to count you among our authors over 50.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend, and check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing, and remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.